Started, and thank you for joining today's webinar. Hello and good afternoon, Team Florida. My name is Alfred Lorigados. I'm with BCC Engineering, and I'd like to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to join us to our Getting Your Office Back to the New Normal webinar. A few quick housekeeping points before we get started. All attendees who would like to ask a question, please use the Q&A option. We have it queued up on our screens. Team Florida will be recording this session and issuing continuing education credits for Team Florida members. The agenda for today will include best practices and procedural changes and implementations to consider. Services Team Florida can leverage to help communicate and implement safety protocols in your workplace. You will hear from various organizations on their approach to safely returning to the workplace and what policies and changes we may see in the future. About a month ago, when we started to plan this webinar together, things with COVID were headed in a different direction. Lately, it seems as if we're going backwards. This doesn't mean we put our heads down, though. Our industry and those in it constantly look ahead. We have brought in for you some great panelists to provide you with some insight on their plans, what they are seeing, and what we can expect to see. With that said, let me introduce you to our panel. Starting with Doreen Lilienfeld. She's the Global Head of the Governance and Advisory Group and the team leader of the compensation, governance, and ERISA practice of Shearman and Sterling. She focuses on a wide variety of compensation-related matters, including the design and implementation of retention and compensation plans, disclosure and regulatory compliance, and employment negotiations with senior executives. And very cool, she's a lecturer in the executive compensation field at Berkeley School of Law. We also welcome Ted Buscaglia with ARC. He is the Executive Vice President for Global Services. Ted oversees global services and the print solutions vertical. He previously managed FedEx Kinko's large format business lines, including sales operations for large format printing and finishing for retail and corporate accounts. He holds a business administration degree and Latin American studies from San Diego State University. We welcome Bob Poole. He's the Director of Transportation Policy at the Reason Foundation. He produces Reason's Transportation Innovations e-newsletter and writes a monthly column for Public Works Financing. He received his BS and MS degrees in mechanical engineering from MIT. We welcome Jerry Warren. He's the president of Horizon Engineering Group. Him and his wife moved to Florida in 1980 and raised 2 daughters, both of which have ended up moving to Colorado. His entire professional career has centered around transportation planning and design. Jay Nagel is a senior vice president and the area's transportation business group leader at HDR. Jay graduated from the Virginia Military Institute with a degree in civil engineering. My friend Jennifer Olson is the Senior Vice President of Strategic Growth for Consor Engineers, LLC. She brings a wealth of experience in Florida's transportation industry in both construction and project management. She served in leadership roles in FDOT District 4 and Florida's Turnpike Enterprise. Jennifer is a graduate of Clemson University and is a registered professional engineer in Florida and 7 other states. Joe Wagner has served as the executive director for the Tampa Hillsborough Expressway Authority, or THIA, since August of 2007 and came to us from Maryland Transportation Authority. During his tenure, THIA has significantly improved maintenance, operations, and the financial position of the agency. The Summit Expressway became an all-electronically toll facility. THIA became an independent toll authority, and statute amendments enabled THIA to participate in regional Tampa Bay toll and transit-related projects. So let's get started. Doreen, would you please share with us the best practices and changes that we should consider in providing a safe work environment?
Sure, Alfred. Thanks, and thanks for having me, everybody. Alfred's going to share some slides that we put together, so why don't we just start on page 2. We're going to quickly go through these while you're all on the phone, but to the extent that you have any questions, you can put them in the Q&A or reach out to us afterwards. So starting on slide 2, Alfred, we found that companies, before getting folks back to work, as a best practice, have been establishing multidisciplinary teams that develop and implement the return to workplace plan. And of course, those teams are comprised of leadership, HR, legal, facilities, information technology, etc. But the best teams we find also survey the employee constituent groups and really get a handle on their concerns and get information at the ground level about what are the actual intricacies of getting folks back to the workplace. Obviously, every workplace is different, and I think that'll be one of the watchwords that you take away from the rest of the panel. But it is important to make sure that everyone is aligned for the health and safety and continuity of the organization. So if we flip over to slide 3, again, in terms of best practices, companies have considered phasing in the employee return so that we don't have 100% of the employees all showing up at a single site at a single time. And in doing that, of course, it's important for companies to keep evolving federal, state, local law and rules top of mind as they're rolling out an implementation plan. And we've put together a list of the applicable laws and rules here, but let's drill into them a little bit on slide 4. Alfred, if you move forward. In preparing for this presentation, what we found was that the laws and the applicable regulations were changing during the week or so that we were putting the slides together. So everything is rapidly evolving. It's really important to stay abreast of the latest and greatest guidance that's appearing weekly. But if you're considering asking employees to return, then you should note that there's nothing in the law that prohibits asking for volunteers to return to a workplace so long as that workplace is safe. And leaving that decision to employee choice in the first instance, rather than making assumptions on employees' availability or demographics, is a good way to go in order to make sure that you're complying with the Americans with Disabilities Act, the Age Discrimination and Employment Act, and the other statutes that we mentioned on the prior page. Obviously, if you've got union agreements, they may mandate the order of your recall, but absent a union workforce, there are some general rules that the government has promulgated. One is that employees who refuse to return to work just out of a generalized fear of contracting a virus can be deemed to have resigned from the employer's perspective. And that also includes employees who refuse to return to work because they'd rather receive unemployment compensation. So we do have guidance in that arena. However, if an employee makes a request to continue working from home as a reasonable accommodation for an existing condition, then that needs to be analyzed on a case-by-case basis and determine whether their physical presence is essential to perform the job function. Now, obviously, in that case, we've learned a lot with folks working at home for the past several months in terms of productivity and what can actually be accomplished on a remote basis. So I think our thinking in this area needs to evolve to the present day facts and circumstances around each employee, the workplace that the employee is going to be working in, their conditions, and their pre-existing condition to the extent they disclose that to you. Okay, on slide 5, what sort of screening protocols can an employer put in place before folks are able to come back to work? So there are some permissible topics that employers can touch upon. Sick inquiries. You are allowed to ask your employees whether they have symptoms currently consistent with COVID-19. Exposure inquiries. You can ask, have they or anybody in their household been exposed before letting them come back to the office? Similarly, travel inquiries. Have they traveled anywhere that's surging? Have they been in a place where they may have been exposed? And then away from work inquiries. So if somebody has been out of the office and has fallen ill, you can ask for a doctor's note in order to have that person return. You obviously can't ask them if they have pre-existing conditions or anything else that's protected by the federal and state and local statutes that we mentioned, but these sorts of screening protocols are permissible. Now, what happens if you find that somebody in the workplace has a positive? You need to be very mindful of employee privacy in that situation. Privacy can be a challenge for a small business or a small location where you've got somebody that tests positive and you've got to tell the remainder of the workforce that there's an issue and that they have potentially been exposed themselves. So balancing, the need to know with the privacy objective, I think is super important for employers to keep front of mind as we move forward. So again, moving forward to slide 6, medical testing, actual health screening. So the EEOC has been issuing guidance in this arena. Temperature checks are okay. They haven't told us how to do it or where to do it or given us any guidelines, but the fact that you can do it is acceptable. And COVID testing itself is okay. However, antibody tests are not permitted, and that's guidance that just came out from the EEOC last week. What remains unsettled, and we'll be curious if we get to that point, and I hope that we get to that point soon, is whether you can require vaccines. And that's an open question, but I think that will be very interesting to watch the law evolve in that area. So moving forward to slide 7, you're going to hear from the rest of the panel about very practical issues that they've all had to contend with as they begin thinking about reopening in different places, different sizes, different operations, whether you're indoors or outdoors. But these are some of the considerations that lots of employers have front of mind. And I just want to point out two. One is shared spaces. If you're within a larger space where you're sharing with others, you can control your own safety protocols, cleaning, PPE, etc. But there is going to be a challenge when you're sharing elevators, restrooms, hallways, corridors, cafeterias, other spaces with others in your building. So it is going to be important to coordinate with your real estate manager, property manager, etc., to determine what others have in place. And similarly, what we call, contingent workers, consultants, folks who are not your employees, and what sort of protocols their actual employers have in place. Those are going to be really important for you to stay on top of and to monitor on a going forward basis. So moving to the next slide, how can you mitigate liability as an employer in this arena? Well, there are two things here that I would really draw to your attention. One is look at your employee policies. Make sure they're up to date. This might be a time that your employees pull out their employment manual, look for information about employee leave, look for information about benefits that might be available to them, and making sure that those policies are up to date and have been updated for recent changes in law is critical at this time. And the other thing is an insurance review. So we recommend that employers review their workers' comp policy and their general employer liability insurance policy and speak to their broker at this time to really confirm that the coverage that they think that they have is actually going to cover current situations and the pandemic in particular. Lastly, we just note a few other items on the next slide. Lots of other changes are happening in the compensation and benefits area. And we just wanted to draw some of those to your attention. Family leave laws have been changed in reaction to COVID. So it's really important not only that employees be provided notice of those changes, but that your HR team is on top of what the latest and greatest is in that arena. And finally, for the final slide, we just ask that everyone stay fluid, stay flexible, stay current on the latest guidance, and stay safe. So thank you, and thanks for your time. And now I'm going to turn it back to Alfred.
Thanks, Doreen. We will come back to Doreen. I'm sure there's going to be some questions on her presentation. In the meantime, we're going to switch over to ARC. And Ted, I understand that Team Florida and ARC Documents have been longtime partners, and your organization is providing some discounted services to Team Florida members to help create a safer work environment.
Yes, thank you so much, Alfred. It's great to be a part of this webinar. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Excellent. Yeah, we work with many of the constituents, the groups related to architects, engineers, constructors throughout Florida. It's a huge market down there for us, and we've been in that market for a long time. And across the country, many of the panelists as well are folks that we work very closely with. So thank you all for the opportunity to present some ideas. We're working very closely with the entire industry on how to deal with the current crisis, and then how do you reimagine and reopen, in regards to what your office looks like, and how it operates, and how do you keep it safe. It's a great segue from Doreen's conversation. Doreen's conversation is very much in line with the things that we're going to talk about. So our purpose here this afternoon is to share some of the things that we've been doing for the various firms out there in regards to consulting with them for their site surveys, what kind of graphics they might need, the safety signage that shows how your team members should work through, and inhabit the space, the installation, and then how we do the site safety plans. The next slide. Yeah. So what we'll typically do is we're working one-on-one with the customers to get a floor plan, and we give them examples of the types of signage that they should consider, based on best practices, based upon the guidance that consultants like Doreen are providing for the marketplace. So you have some very practical examples of what to look for in regards to what your local county and or state would require. And so we have these signs that we have developed and go in the different numbered slots. And so as you go through, you can imagine your space and how you're going to provide that space in a safe manner in regards to making your employees feel comfortable, and as well as meeting the guidance for OSHA and anything else that might happen to be in your marketplace. But yeah, these are obvious benefits. We help add and remove signage, and you can help put different things in the various work areas. There's a digital floor plan, and we work and do that survey for you. We give recommendations. You can choose the budget, but whether it's ARC or anyone else, you're able to take a look and see exactly how this would work. Alfred, there's a message in the chat window we'll address at the end. So the graphic consultation, these are examples of the different types of signage depending on what your workspace looks like. These are typical corporate type examples, but sometimes they're outdoors, sometimes they're indoors. You can see how people would flow and have you have the proper distancing and all the different types of environments that you're going to need to be able to sign, right? To be able to show your employees where they should go, what's forbidden, and make sure there's adequate spacing and things are cut off from use if they don't meet the spacing requirements. Large lobbies, and those things all have different requirements, and some of those signs also have specific requirements to themselves. For example, a floor graphic has to have a specific ADA requirement for scuff resistance, for tread, so you don't slip and fall on them, and they have requirements for ADA as well. And so some things to consider, right? We're going to go through this quickly. This is the capacity, right? How are you going to queue your folks? Where's the passageways? And how do you continue to manage safe sanitation in areas such as bathrooms? Keep going there, Alfred. Right, so the capacity in elevators, bathrooms. If you look at the next one, we will consider like how is the queuing? Are you managing 6 foot? Okay, when you deal with a busy time period, like 9:30 in the morning when people are queuing up to get in an elevator, how are you going to manage that? How are you going to keep the distancing? Those are places where you're going to need to consider the types of signage that's available. Safe passage. How are you moving through the space? Is there adequate space for people to be able to move through that building? And we have thousands of examples. We'll get to it at the end. We have a catalog that you can look through. Anyone who's interested, we have some contact information for a catalog that at least you can use as inspiration if you choose not to use ARC, but there's plenty of inspiration for you to be able to see exactly what your options are for wayfinding and directing your employees through the buildings. Lastly, the sanitation. Those are the 4 main areas of consideration for you as you consider any level of going back into those offices. They have to be signed properly, or you're subject to some sort of other condition of potential liability and or an outbreak. ARC does provide installation. If you choose an ARC-led solution, we do offer the consultation, manufacturing, and installation. We will sign and unsign any areas that you may want to have redone for your offices. So just as a summary, you need to consider how you do a walkthrough, how you do the drawings. We'll get them printed, and our, of course, thinks we're the simplest, easiest method to be able to get some of those things done. And we have a program specifically made for Team Florida for a free site survey. I know we won't charge for the upfront services. There's a graphic consultation, and then we'll give you a discount. I'm doing it directly through Marco Garcia. He's the person to contact directly. There's his email right there. Anyone at Team Florida can also provide the contact information and/or this presentation. Feel free to use it with your consultation with the executives, operations departments, HR groups, etc. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ted, and we appreciate it. And I'm sure we're going to come back with some questions. And just to address Rick Chester's question, and I know we're going to hit it in some of these already questions that have been submitted, is one of the largest challenges is we have is a multi-story office building. At present, with wave 1 and voluntary returns to work and the closure of other offices in the building, this has not been a challenge. But what guidelines when the group gets larger and elevators are limited to 2 occupants? Any thoughts or guidance on how to get associates to their office in a timely manner? Have not received any clear guidance from building managers. Not sure associates will walk up 6 or more floors. Is that something, Doreen, that you've seen come up in an issue as far as guidance?
Yeah, and I was just typing an answer to Rick, so that's good. You're saving me some time. So this is a common challenge. Obviously, I'm in New York, and there was a study done in the Chrysler building, which is famous, that you'll all know, and they said in order to get everybody into the Chrysler building, given their existing elevator capacity, it would take 6 hours just to get people in. And then, obviously they would have to leave or eat or do something else. So with 2 people in an elevator at a time, that's a real challenge for anybody who's in a real high rise. So Ted was talking about signage and sort of directing people into particular cars. I think you do need to get with your building manager, see if a car can be dedicated to you and your workforce. Ask folks if you can stagger in 5-minute increments starting 8:05. Have that elevator just constantly running to your facility and back down. And you know that everybody on it is with you, and then you could have cleaning resources dedicated to it so that you're able to, do a regular wipe down of it. I don't know if it's an electronic panel, but a lot of elevators have electronic panels which are touchless, which can really reduce the amount of cross-contamination. You can ask people to walk down the steps as a matter of directing traffic, but not everybody's going to be able to do that. And I think if you're on the 6th floor, not everybody's going to be able to walk up either. But I do think this is something that you need to take up with your landlord or building owner, because it is a common challenge. Ted, I don't know if you have any particular experience in that issue as well.
Yeah, I think your expertise is much better. We deal with a very generalized environment, but yeah, there's a certain space and capacity restraint that will have to be figured out, mathematically, and then be able to queue your people accordingly. Like you said, you just can't do it in New York. There's just no way. You can't. The queuing will not work, and so you're gonna have to keep some people out of those buildings for a while.
The other thing you could think about is redeploying your freight elevator, which might be larger. You might be able to put more people in it at the same time. So if you've got a freight elevator that you don't normally use to transport individuals, perhaps you could deploy that as well to sort of help with the flow.
Great. So over the past 10 years, we have seen office space design shifting to a more collaborative environment, more open floor plans, designed to inspire collaboration amongst peers. What were some of the surprises that you saw in your organization as we transitioned to COVID-19? And let's start with Jay.
First thing was just talking with the staff, having conversations with them, welcoming them back into the office, and trying to figure out who was interested in coming back and who had concerns about coming back. Each person's got a different level of concern, and safety and well-being is foremost, number one priority.
J-
Our
J-
offices, each of them a little different throughout the country, but they are, some of them are open. Alfred, can you hear me?
yeah, Jay, we're having a little bit of technical issues with your mic.
Okay. Is it any better?
Yep, there you are.
Okay. As you mentioned, yes, the first thing we looked at was just talking to our staff and figuring out the level of concern that each one has, as each individual nationwide's got a different level of concern related to what's happening with COVID. As you mentioned before, most of our offices are open level format for collaborative and an engaging work environment. A lot of them are cubicles. We have people, the offices are right now down in size for who's coming in. So as we walk through, we were able to realize we can still keep 6 foot distance from everybody and able to maintain just as we have right now without having to make any major changes other than what you heard already in the presentation with some one-way direction, limiting seating in conference rooms and things along those lines.
Right. Jennifer, how does Consor plan to address remote work in the future? Are you planning a hybrid type of environment, or what concerns do you see with the remote workforce?
Great question, Alfred. How we're taking a look at remote working situations, what we're looking at today in June or almost July is much different than what we were looking at in January. I think that's one of the surprising things that we've had with this quick response to the COVID and for the shelter in place or safer at home orders is how fast everyone was able to go ahead and adapt and reallocate to working from home. We still had a small number of employees that volunteered to come in to continue with the work effort. What we're looking at in the long term, like I said, is different than what we originally were discussing in January. We have found that our staff has been very productive and it's also been popular. But we're going to be taking a look at a hybrid, like you brought up, where we have opportunities for people to work from home, but have specific schedules where they do come in the office, and then also flexible schedules that employees can go ahead and select, whether they want to come in very early and leave earlier so you don't have that queue coming in and out of the office, or it's something like 4 10-hour days or something like that. So we're looking at a lot of different options. We don't have anything written or concrete right yet. As the number of cases have increased, again, we will continue to adapt to what the future looks like.
Great, thanks, Jennifer. Let's jump back to Doreen a second. And I know I've seen this come up here at our firm. Is how do you recommend addressing an employee who's concerned with returning to work due to COVID-19 exposure with a potential family member that is high risk?
If you've been watching the news over the past 24 hours, you've seen that with Major League Baseball, right? That the players are opting out because they've got young children at home or sick family members and they don't feel that they can participate in the season. So this is an actual real issue. And again, you're treading the line between employee privacy on the one hand, and obviously the need for productivity and business continuity on the other hand. But it is quite delicate. Certainly if somebody has a pre-existing condition themselves, then the law mandates that you make accommodations for that. And depending on what they do for your organization, to Jennifer's point, we've learned a lot about how productive people can be on a remote basis. And so having some artificial need for them to come into the office, if they are able to Zoom in and have the technology to work from home and you can provide that technology to them as a reasonable accommodation, then I think that that's something that you'll have to do. And the law is going to require it. When it comes to family members, certainly the leave aspects of the CARES Act that have been adopted require accommodation for family members as well. So if an employee wants to take an extended family leave because there are issues in the house and they're worried about cross-contamination, then that is another aspect of the law that's required and evolving. So I do think that these things need to be taken very seriously. Obviously, sports players, the youngest and the healthiest among us and the most fit, are obviously struggling with the same issues. So I think it's a challenge that everybody on this call faces.
Definitely. So a popular topic is the face mask. So Jerry, what guidelines is your organization implementing with face masks and hand sanitizers or any other challenges you're seeing?
Well, Alfred, let me start with the easy one. The hand sanitizers, of course, you know, we have them distributed in everybody's office. Of course, we encourage the use continuously. We have them at our printer stations and our break room, that sort of thing. So we did, you know, I'm sure like everybody else, we made the investment in making sure there's plenty of hand sanitizers around. Face mask. That's a interesting topic. For the most part, people are fairly opinionated on this. You have a core group in the middle that says, you know, okay, I'm going to do what's being required and that sort of thing. But then on the outside, you have fringe groups that are, you know, not quite on board with it, and then the group that is. We're fortunate in our office here that years ago we adopted a closed office concept. In other words, all employees have offices with doors. So we don't require the wearing of face masks in the office if you're in your individual office. We also happen to we take up the entire fourth floor of our building, the entire suite, and there's multiple door openings that people can come in and out to get to their office. But there is a requirement of the building that you have to wear a mask to get into the suite. So there's no question there. Everybody has to abide by that rule. And as far as inside the office, what we've implemented, if you're inside a conference room and there's more than one person in there, there's a requirement to wear a face mask. And we have the same basic rules. We don't have that in the restrooms because we allow one person in the restroom at a time. We have a vacancy sign set up so when you're in there, say it occupied and that sort of thing. But in the discussions with most of our staff, again, it's an ongoing process. But under certain circumstances, you are required to wear a face mask.
Great, thanks. Yeah, I have been seeing face masks more and more all over the place. Everywhere we go, can't come in without one. So it's become part of grabbing your wallet, phone, keys, and your face mask. So
and that's the case here. You can't get out of the building without one. You can't get in it without one.
So let's move on to Jay again. Jay, and this one is a little more sensitive, but nonetheless we want to cover it. Have you had to let employees go or have to restructure your organization as a result of the economic state and COVID-19? And are you encouraging staff to take time off to disconnect, even though you can't travel, but you want to have employees enjoy their leisure activities? What's HDR doing there?
Alfred, due to HDR's size, we've been very fortunate in the diversity of our portfolio of everything that we'd have as a company nationwide, worldwide. We have not had to let anybody go related to COVID or had any real restructuring related to COVID yet. We have had some pockets of utilization that's dipped on certain business groups, but with the opportunity to use WorkShare as we utilize very strongly within our firm, we've been able to reassign and plug people in other locations where that we can keep them busy during this. We've got some rough times ahead of us. We're not sure what the future holds for any of us, but we've been very fortunate right now related to where we are with our staffing and being employee owned. And everybody's looking out for everybody. We're not letting anybody do any overtime. We're making sure we share work equally the best we can across the company and across all business lines and all states. Related to PTO or forcing anybody, haven't required anybody to take some time off. Some have been utilizing some time off, just taking some time at home or going somewhere out of Florida where they think it's a little bit less contagious, somewhere where they can get a little bit more remote and spend some family time along those lines. We've seen some of that, but we have not been pushing anybody to take PTO or any personal time off. A lot of open communication with our staff, just talking to them. We have, coffee breaks, virtual, just checking in, letting people ask questions just to figure out what the pulse of each person is. And what we're realizing is each one of us has a different level of concern related to the COVID-19, returning to the office. Some that want to be in full time, and we're our type of business was essential, so we were never closed our doors. So we've had some people in office full time and some people working from home full time, just trying to balance it out the best we can. But we've been very lucky so far.
Definitely. And I think, yeah, go ahead, Jennifer.
Yeah, if I can add also, I think we've been very fortunate as an industry for twofold. One is we have continued to move forward. Our clients or the owners have continued to progress construction projects, design projects, and project pursuits. That has been a great asset for us to continue to keep our staff doing the same jobs that they had been in before. And also, especially with the CEI and the contractors, they've actually increased their hours and taken advantage of the decreased traffic on the roadways. And then the other aspect I think we've been very beneficial for, and knock on wood, we are not considered a hot spot for cases. So as an industry as a whole, as our contractors and our owners and then our own staff have been very good at maintaining the social distance, at hand washing, wearing the mask, because the proof is, while we've had some impacts, they have not been as large scale as other industries.
Definitely. So we're going to move over to Bob Poole. And Bob, I'd like to get your take on some of this, and specifically how transit systems have been adjusting since they don't break even as far as a revenue perspective. And then what's your opinion on the sales tax outlook, and how could Florida compensate for the revenue loss?
Well, I think to answer this, we really got to look first at the overall pattern of who's using what mode of transportation. And transit has been in a decline for the last 5 years before the pandemic. Transit's mode share was declining. It's down to 4.9% as of the last nationwide average figure. Driving alone has been stable for years at around 75–76% of the daily commute. Carpool has been in a long-term decline, down to 9% as of last year. And the only area that's growing is telecommuting. And all this is before the pandemic. So telecommuting was up to 5.3%, higher market share of journey to work than transit in most metro areas around the country. So if you look at what's happening now, there's been some really kind of foolish media stories and including a few academic studies saying we're about to have, as the recovery goes on, massive congestion on the highways because people will abandon transit and start driving, they won't carpool, and so forth. What those things leave out is the likely permanent increase in telecommuting. Nobody knows how far that's going to go. It's like something 35% of all jobs potentially could be done remotely. These are mostly managerial, professional, attorneys, consultants, and so forth. And if you look at how those people mostly get to work, vast majority of them drive, and mostly drive alone, or use rail transit, which is very interesting, and it's a phenomenon only recently identified. So if you look at what's happened, if telecommuting doubles from about 5% to about 10%, that's mostly going to reduce people driving, other things equal. It's going to have some impact on transit, but probably mostly on rail transit. So that's going to leave the transit systems with declining sales tax revenue and already under the gun because of declining market share before this, in a really difficult position. And so the question is, what's the least bad thing for them to do? Their most important mission, I look at this as a kind of a triage situation. The most important mission of transit system in America is to enable low-income people to get to jobs. And that's done, the vast majority that takes, outside of New York City, vast majority that takes place on bus systems. So maintaining and keeping the bus system operating and doing the job that it needs to do for low-income people is probably job number one in the recovery for transportation. And telecommuting by keeping massive congestion from reappearing is probably going to help in that more than it will hurt. Sorry about that. So on the triage situation, one thing, I mean, it's painful to stop doing something that you're doing. But one thing that could help transit systems in the short term is to put on hold expansion of their rail systems, which takes a lot of money, and focus all the resources they have on maintaining and rebuilding the bus system so that it does the most important job that the transit agency has. And so that's my short-term suggestion on that. There is the only thing that's out there right now is some federal aid that's come to transit systems around the country. There might be more coming down the pike, but that's up to Congress, and we don't have any idea. So transit agencies are going to be in a tough position for several years, given this recovery and how fast it goes.
No doubt. One thing I've seen here in South Florida is traffic has picked up, even though I find that the rush hour window is shorter. It seems like it's 5 to 6 p.m. as opposed to 4 to 8 p.m. So that's one thing I'm noticing. But every day, more and more, I see more and more traffic, and the window is long.
I see the same thing, Alfred. And INRIX continues to put out data, and as of a week or two ago, nationwide, they were saying we were back to 90% of what the traffic was in January. Now, this was for May. Now, May is a higher traffic month than February, so it's not a complete fair comp, but still, to be 90% of the traffic in January is a remarkable recovery. And I'm not sure who all those people are, given what the unemployment rate still is. But we are going to, I mean, if I look at the financial airports, let's say, versus toll roads are going to be recovered basically in their traffic by next year, I guarantee. It's going to take 2 or 3 years before airports have anywhere close to a return to something approaching normal. So very vastly different situation between roads and air.
Well, so to one of our favorites is toll roads. So let's bring up Joe. Joe, before we get into a question I have for you, why don't you talk to the group about what you mentioned with your group at THEA and how well you transitioned into a remote workforce.
Sure. It actually started with being all electronically told. Never when I was trying to talk our board into doing this back in 2010 did I list pandemic ready as a means of toll operations as one of the potential benefits. So, but we were doing, because we were all electronically told and we kind of had that mindset, the degree to which my staff was equipped and the office was enabled with the various components of computer networking, I was pleasantly surprised by how fast we were able to convert to a remote operational status. Coincidentally, we had started testing we do our own in-house toll by plate reading. We actually started about half a year ago doing a couple test cases where we let those people work remotely. And so they were ready to go. When we threw the switch, it was pretty seamless that we were able to do this. Some staff we had to go out and do some quick purchases of laptops and put the software on their systems, but never heard of Zoom before. But even I was able to download Zoom on a personal basis, and we quickly bought a company feature. So all of our webinars, all of our public meetings, our board meetings have been done electronic, and we'll continue to do that for the foreseeable future. As a result, I feel no pressure at all to reopen the office in a rapid method. I'm comfortable working this way, not as comfortable as some others. I'm an old dog, so I still like to see people. But that said, everything's working adequately, if not just fine. So been very pleasantly surprised in that way.
Thanks, Joe. So, Joe, one of the things you just said it is seeing people, and part of our, I miss Team Florida. I miss going there every couple months and seeing all the familiar faces and enjoying it. So how do we start connecting and marketing with our clients while we're all facing this pandemic? How do we come see staff, learn about projects and interface? What are some thoughts on that?
Well, the way we've been working is it's either through Teams or Zoom. And if there is a need, if we feel the need is adequate for consultants to come in and visit with us, we do that in the appropriate way. We have a board member, we'll spread people out greater than 6 feet, and with everybody their consent, you can take your face mask off. But as you get in any common area in here, we're going to ask you to wear a face mask. And so our biggest objective is to keep business moving. We have a work program. As Bob said, I think in transportation, you're looking at toll roads as being one of the best able to weather this storm. Our traffic was back up to 70%. We're seeing some interesting things going there. Just touch on this. It was up to 70% of prior year, but with the recent uptick, it's dropped down slightly below 70% again. So your customers are smart. They don't need to be told what to do. It happens, and it does happen pretty quickly. But set that aside, just an observation. We should be putting as much work out on the street as we can, and that's why we're continuing. We haven't missed a board meeting since this has started. So as we get projects advertised and we can award them through our board's actions, that's what we're doing, looking for opportunities to do more of that. So for the customer network, or the vendors, the contractors and consultant providers, that's our goal. Keep the business moving, keep the workflow going out, and looking for opportunities in some of these new congressional, potential stimulus programs to take advantage of any new money. Critically, some of the out there right now is some refinancing opportunities that may come to us, where they are going to allow you to refi some municipal tax-free bonds. Really hope that happens. That'd be a nice way to take more pressure off of my finance. Let me put more work on the street again. So it's all about the money, right?
Great stuff, Joe. And just briefly, where's Thea right now with traffic and revenue? Are you creeping back up?
We are. As I noted, we hit a low point about the middle of April, where our traffic was down 55 to 60%, was on a steady rise up until last week. We achieved 70% of what was prior normal. But last week, with those rapid increases, you heard, one day after another, record number of COVID cases being announced, saw it creep back a little bit, drop back 2 to 5%. So playing it by ear, see how it goes. But it's going to be it's not going to be a slow recovery, but it's not going to be rapid. I kind of agree with Bob that I think by the time this fiscal year is over, we'll be, I think, at least back to within 5 or 10% of what our prior year had been. And our revenue forecasters predict similar. Long term, we see, maybe it drops off 2 to 3% over the 10-year period of what you previously had forecast. And we think most of that's going to be maybe the impact of the telecommuting. As Bob noted, I think that is an area where you're going to see a significant growth in commuting, which for my business, it's not going to hurt me. I'm looking at a growth in my particular community, population growth prior to this event, projected to be about 50% over the next 25 years. So my needs will far outstrip the reduced or the increased commuter by teleworking that's going to occur.
Definitely. Thanks, Joe. So to the audience, we do have a Q&A button. If you want to hit that, type something in, we can ask the panel. In the meantime, there's something related to, as this remote workforce becomes more and more popular, one of the concerns I know we've discussed internally, and I want to hear from each of the panelists, is what's your biggest concern with cybersecurity for the remote worker?
Alfred, I'll jump in first. We've already seen an increase out there related to locking down so many different devices when you're working from home, instead of having the security of your own network within the office with the iPhones, the Droids, your own iPads or Surface devices and computers, for making sure that you have security method to get in there. And if you're using your own personal equipment, we've put in additional safety measures on the personal devices if you want to utilize anything that's work related to it, where that the company could get in, monitor and wipe. Really don't monitor, but if they ever needed to, there is a way to back source what was happening. And we've even done some beta testing within the office for emails that come out that are outside. Now all our emails that are outside source that could have any bad links to them are highlighted so that you don't open them without knowing the source.
You know, one of the things that we've done is we discourage the use of people's personal devices at the house. We went out and did the investment because we weren't quite prepared for everybody working from the house. But when we decided we were going to be working remotely, we purchased laptops and got them all, you know, got the software updated on them, like you were saying, Jay. So I would have to say, for the most part, all of our folks that are working remotely have equipment and software that we provided. And I will say that one of the things that we've noticed, even before this hit, you know, I'd say in the last year or so, some of the key hires we made, some of the requests were, hey, can I work from the house a day or so? So we were kind of already headed in that direction, and we've actually got a committee set together on how to deal with it before this hit, but now they've got a whole new direction on, you know, exactly. We sent out a survey and we asked folks, first of all, when are you comfortable with coming back? And then, are you coming back, basically? And surprisingly enough, we probably got 10% of our folks saying, you know, I kind of like this. I might want to stay home. So moving forward, we're going to have to address that as well.
Definitely. Well, I took note of a couple of things, and one, I'm going to steal Joe's term of the pandemic-proof business. I really like that. It's one of the things that I've been thankful for, and I've every time I talk to my colleagues in the industry or here at the firm, it seems like we're very thankful that we work in the industry that we do. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing that has been a theme that I've seen, is that we've been able to not skip a beat as far as being able to deliver services to our clients. And that's something that we're all proud of. And just some closing thoughts from each of you as we move forward. But I do want to start with Ted and ARC, the partnership. Just Ted, just some closing thoughts, and then I just want to round out the group from Doreen all the way through the 4Js, and then wrap it up.
Well, I think the sentiments that everybody's spoken about here, we echo. You know, we're very grateful to be spared the worst of this, and we're happy and you know, that we're safe and can provide services to continue for the organizations that we've been a part of for a long time. So thank you for letting us participate. You know, I think my sentiments are, hey, we got to keep this thing going. And so we have to do all that we can to make it safe and appropriate and legal and all those things. So it was a really great conversation to have and be a part of. And I'm glad we're here and be able to continue to support the organizations here.
Thanks, Ted. And if you need that information again from Marco Garcia, it's marco.garcia@e-arc.com, or your Team Florida membership discount for ARC's services. So thank you, Ted, for joining us. Jennifer, let's start with you on some closing thoughts.
Okay, thank you, Alfred. I think we will continue to have challenges as companies and as an industry overall of adapting to what the changing landscape is, whether it's new ADA requirements or our local requirements or federal requirements. That's going to be a challenge for all of us, staying on top of that. I do want to, you know, credit a lot of the HR folks have come up with ad hoc, you know, here's our safety plan. This is what the current criteria is. Oh, it's changed, all that. I think I don't think we recognize HR enough, but they've definitely had to step up to this with this constant changing. And then I can't leave it without saying, you know, you've got the folks that are constantly sourcing your Clorox wipes, your hand sanitizers, all that. 6 months into it or 4 months into it, I can't believe we still can't find it readily at the stores. So that is something that we have to continue to stay on top of to make sure that we maintain these supplies. And the final item is just, as an industry, we just have to keep on our toes so we don't contribute to the spread, and also for our staff to be healthy.
Definitely. At least there's toilet paper though, right?
Yeah.
And Kleenex.
Jerry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, first of all, Alfred, thank you very much for inviting me to be a part of this panel. I can say it is the most popular topic in our office. It's one of the most popular topics for me personally at my house and when I'm social distancing with folks. So you're spot on with picking this topic at this time. I think, again, I'll echo everybody. We're blessed to be in the business that we are, and we're blessed with Joe and all the expressways and the DOT moving forward and keeping things going. That's a great thing. And then finally, moving forward, I think it's gonna change the way we do business as we move forward. People are, again, getting comfortable with working from the house, telecommuting. I can say I probably, more Teams and Zoom meetings in the past 3 or 4 weeks than I have regular meetings in the past year. It's easy to do and it's popular. So I think it's going to cause, if not a lot, but somewhat of a change in our business moving forward.
Right. Thanks, Jerry. Jay?
I'd have to echo, same as Jennifer, Jerry, for everything that they just said. And we are all blessed that we're in this type of industry. We're also blessed, when we did our rehearsal the other day talking, we all mentioned about the technology advantages we have today than we didn't have 10 years ago or 20 years ago. So we're very fortunate that it's happening right now, that we have the ability to adapt, because the only constant in the world is change. And in our industry, that's what we do every day, is adapt and make things better, right? So we will continue to evolve. We just got to make sure that we put the safety and the well-being of our teammates that we work with, the ones that either whether they're internal clients, sub-consultants, or if we're a sub-consultant to somebody else, or the owners, that we understand and respect the different levels of each person's concern related to this COVID-19, and we keep plugging forward, because we are a people business. So we got to figure out how to get back together, and instead of it all being telecommuting eventually. And thanks for the opportunity to be part of this today.
Thanks, Jay. Joe?
Yeah, just want to keep business rolling. Another thought I had while sitting here is one of the things we haven't talked about with this all electronic way of doing business is cybersecurity. Heads up to everybody. We did a assessment of our IT systems, toll systems, and office systems last year and implemented some changes. We hadn't been threatened at that time, but we did the assessment and implemented changes since then. And it just makes me aware of, going to have to pay even more attention to that going forward. So just something else to think about in our new world.
Definitely. So we do have a question from Steve Farrell, which we'll get to in a second, but I want to hear some closing thoughts from you. And then Doreen, I want to finish off with you with that one question that we got. So Bob, go ahead.
Well, this is my 20th year of being a full-time telecommuter, so this is kind of old hat to me. When I was CEO of Recent Foundation, we started the idea of a virtual think tank, and it's advanced slowly and step by step as the technology got better. But now we're about 2/3 virtual, full-time telecommuting staff all across the country, which enable us to be plugged in a lot more places as we're trying to help shape various policies. So keep that in mind for your own organizations, but also definitely it's going to be a key factor to watch in terms of what's happening particularly in urban transportation, the balance between all the different modes of commuting. This may really help the highways be not as congested as they were and able to cope with population growth as we've heard, as Joe mentioned, a little bit easier. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Bob. So one of the things, and this is Team Florida's bread and butter, is what do you see as the biggest challenge to hold a large or even mid-sized conference again? That was the question Steve posed, and Doreen, let's hit that as we close out and go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I think it's a lot of the same challenges that we've been talking about with coming back to work, only on a much grander scale. So you've got the airlines, the airports, the ability to have people traveling cross country to get to a place, like Las Vegas, where you would normally have very large conferences and people get together for industry events. So I think that, just the transportation and logistics, which you guys are all much more expert at than me, would be the biggest obstacle. But then there's the sort of classic prisoner's dilemma element to this and to everything else, which is I know what I'm doing and I know what's good for me. I know if it was my grandmother what I would tell her to do, but I don't necessarily know what the guy next to me is doing, and that it creates a lot of uncertainty for folks. And until you have that certainty, would you get on public transportation or rail, commuting to Bob's point? And, are people following the rules and the laws and wearing masks and doing the things that, Jerry has said that are mandated in his office? Are people truly following the rules? So I think it's a matter of public trust and what's worked through this crisis. And I think that we're starting to see the effects evolving in different places and different geographies. And I think it's it's unfortunately a really interesting social experiment, particularly sitting here in New York, as to what could work and what might not work in a very densely populated area. The other thing I guess I would say is sort of my parting notes is, I started by talking about the law, but I think a lot of this here is a law of unintended consequences. So, to Jerry's point, we have a lot of folks who wanted to work remotely as well. And we always talked about cross-pollination of ideas and security and the other issues that we touched upon as reasons to get us together and have us work collaboratively in the office. People very abruptly got what they were wishing for in March, and I think now there are some unintended consequences of that, including people who realize the training element and the human element of being together in the same space and what sort of value that lends. But we're starting to see to the issues of PTO that Jay was talking about. I mean, issues around employee wellness. It's really hard to sit here and talk on a camera for 10 hours a day. And I think that's wearing folks down to the point that, if you've started reading in the press that some people are developing agoraphobia, where they haven't been out in so long that they don't really know how to interact in society, or they're too petrified to do that. So I think that there are going to be follow-on effects that are going to affect our human capital. And I think that we, as employers need to be mindful of that and try to at least anticipate or react to the extent we can anticipate some of these, broader issues and stay abreast of that. So thank you guys all for having me. I really appreciated listening to you in the macroeconomic sense of what you guys are struggling with. It's really helpful to me as an advisor to learn.
Well, on behalf of the industry, I do want to thank Team Florida and Brady and Barbara specifically for putting this together. I think it's been a timely one. I haven't missed a Team Florida webinar, and I'm not going to continue to miss them for this year. So I think in 2021, we're going to be back. I think we're going to be together. We're going to enjoy it. But for the time being, we'll make do with this and keep our heads down and stay focused and stay safe. I want to wish everybody a happy 4th of July.